Hey gang, it's KR, King of D&D Homebrew, and this is part of my continuing series covering the Dungeon of the Mad Mage. This is going to be one of two parts on level 5, Willow Wood. And what I'm going to do today is I'm going to cover the major personages or power centers or whatever. It's kind of a standard, one of the sections on my criteria that I use for covering dungeons, but I wanted to do it here because the actual form, the structure of this dungeon is one of the major personages because it is unique in terms of its structure, in terms of all the other 22 levels of the Dungeon of the Mad Mage. And, you know, I do this series initially was to help you out there design your own mega dungeons. We see what works or what doesn't work, in my opinion, with the Dungeon of the Mad Mage. But I've learned since then, as I've been doing this, that, you know, I get people, you know, my comments and whatnot, that people that are running the Dungeon of the Mad Mage for their group. And I think some of the lessons here can help you make sure you have fun, and especially on this level. As we'll see, I think it has some issues that, you know, you can resolve. You can make a little more sense. And part of that is thinking about these personages, the power centers, and one of which is the concept of this dungeon itself. All right, so starting off, as I said, the structure itself, this dungeon is an underground forest that is magically made to look like it is outdoors. It's complete with sunshine. You know, it's got animals. You can feel the heat. It has seasons, although it's a magical calendar that can control those seasons. You know, you can have day and night here. The only thing you don't have is a breeze. And the cavern is such that, you know, unless you fly right up to the walls or the ceiling, it appears to be outside with sunshine, you know, sun in the sky or whatnot. And so that is unique. As I said, there's one other level, I think Slither Swamp on the 8th level, I believe, that is home to bullywugs. It's like a marsh, underground marsh, but it's clear that it's caverns. There's no attempt made to disguise, whereas here you have very powerful spells that have gone into making this appear outdoors. And when we were creating the mega dungeons way back when, we always loved to have a level or so where you had, you know, an underground space that was like outside, whether it was simulated like this with magic, or whether it was some vast cavern so large that somehow, you know, it could have an atmosphere, you know, such as you had rainwater, you had all the things that living matter, you know, plants and animals needed, above ground plants and animals needed to thrive. The reason we liked this so much was it gave us as GM such an opportunity to expand on some of the things you had in caverns or dungeons, right? You had underground seas, you had, you know, that opportunity for civilizations to exist, you know, all sorts of monsters from above ground that suddenly now were appearing in these vast caverns. And these huge spaces allowed for tactical, you know, battles or situations that you usually didn't have in a cavern or dungeon. You know, and the concept of vast underground spaces has a rich history. You have the sort of subterranean world speculative fiction going back hundreds of years, the most famous of which as kind of the granddaddy is Journey to the Center of the Earth by Jules Verne. He had huge areas lit by various crystals and plant life. He had the vast underground sea. And importantly, he also put prehistoric creatures, you know, dinosaurs basically, in these spaces. And which leads to the idea that the, you know, underdark world would have fantastical creatures that had long since disappeared from above ground. And this book influenced all sorts of authors, you know, like Edgar Rice Burroughs of Tarzan fame created this hollow earth concept, which was very influential. And, you know, there were people that actually believed it. But he had this world Pellucidar, which, you know, was populated again by the prehistoric monsters, but also by primitive people. And then he had these pterosaurs that had like telekinesis powers. You know, it's very humorous. He had a sun dangling, I think, a micro sun, he called it, that lit everything. You should check it out because I'm pretty sure it's on, you know, it's public domain. But, you know, the idea of the hollow earth fascinated people. But of course, we all know that in the real world, underground spaces are very dark, very restricted, very dank. It does have life that lives in it, but it's very specialized, especially when you get into areas that are very far removed from the surface. But it has a special place in the world of D&D because you have magic. Because the thing was, even though in those early days of D&D, we did try to create these underground spaces where there was a sort of natural ecology based on fantastical, you know, phosphorescent plants or, you know, rocks or creatures, whatnot, fantastical, that we thought, okay, well, these could create an environment such that above ground style life could exist. And then you could have vast spaces far below the earth that you could get to through magical means, teleports or whatnot, where they would have enough space that they have a sort of an ecology, as I mentioned, they have clouds that would form or whatever, so that you could recreate the above ground below. Basically the hollow earth concept. But the problem here, as always, it always strains disbelief to have any kind of natural ecology, and it's not really necessary. You can just have magic that is powerful enough to simulate the above ground world in a chamber far beneath the surface. Because magic can do anything, and especially that ultimate magical spell in D&D, the Wish. And that's what goes into creating this underground forest called Willow Wood. Halaster, the master of the Undermountain, has used a bunch of wish spells to create this simulated forest. And he has this magic item, the calendar stone, where you can turn it and cause the seasons to change. And unless you get very close to the ceiling or walls, you can't tell that you're underground. But even if magic provides the modus operandi by which this underground chamber could be created, there's an issue based on the module format of the Dungeon of the Mad Mage, in which they have a one-page map, usually with 10-foot squares. And so what happens is the area of this forest is super small. And what that means is, unfortunately, you have a very small space to contain this forest. I've created a map of this in Dungeon Draft. If we looked at it, here at its widest part, it's 350 across by 350 long at its apex. And that's broken up by various cavern walls. The main forest is 250 by 220 feet. That's less than an American football field in length. Obviously, it's wider than an American football field, but it's not that big. Now, it does say in the overall setup that unless specified, when you have any kind of cavern or space in the Dungeon of the Mad Mage, the ceiling is as high as the room is wide, so you got 250-foot ceilings, which makes it look, that illusion of being in an outdoor space seem more real. But still, anyone who comes here is not fooled for very long to say, oh, I'm outside, right? I've suddenly been transported. They're going to get to the edges of this and see, oh, we're in a cavern. So the first thing here that I would differ from, if I was creating this kind of underground space that is like a forest for a mega dungeon, I would have a level that is enormous. I might even make this miles large, such that it really could sustain, civilization or host of animals. I know Halaster's coming in, he's restocking animals. Really what he's probably doing is taking away the dead ones or when it overpopulates or whatever, plucking them out, because such a small space would quickly become problematic. So I really think what you have here in the Dungeon of the Mad Mage is sort of a solarium or greenhouse effect, where it's clear that this artificial forest has been created by Halaster to simulate an outdoor space, but it's obvious that it's not. And so it doesn't really sustain life. So why would Halaster spend, wish spells? Super time consuming, they sap your strength, they're expensive. Why would he do this to create this kind of mini solarium? Well, that takes us to our second personages and the main power center of this level, Willow the Druid. So Halaster uses these wish spells to create this underground chamber for Willow, the namesake of this level, Willow Wood. She is at the 18th level archdruid who fell for Yarnark, one of his ill-fated apprentices, and she came to inexplicably live in the Undermountain, right? And what happened was they fell out. Yarnark became deranged, perhaps because of, as what happens to all of Halaster's apprentices. And they get into a big fight, and she blasts him with spells, being 18th level, kills him. Now, I have to say, I find the backstory of Willow to be a little juvenile, a little weak as to why she's on the 5th level in this, really constricted area. The love angle is kind of overdone, and then it's mixed with this extreme violence. Because after that, Willow falls for this human mercenary named Krisan, and then Halaster turns her against him. They have another battle. She slaughters him, buries him. There's this will-o-wisp. It's a long story. And now it says, all memories of the above ground have faded from her mind. She's described in the text as, distant but kind when the players come. Is she insane? Was she driven insane by guilt over killing these two lovers, or just being trapped in this place? And I might say insane because, oh, by the way, she invited a group of cultists to come here. She didn't like what they were doing. She slaughtered them, then left their bodies hanging in caves to warn off other adventurers. Oh, and another thing, she has a room that she's covered with the bones of all the adventures that she's killed over the years. Oh yes, my friends, she's crazy. But the thing is, like I suggest, the mad Ophelia character wandering her woods, racked by guilt, or I don't remember, it's a little out there. It's a little like, oh, those ladies in the love life, right? And along those lines, another element that doesn't quite add up for me is the fact that Willow is an 18th level archdruid. In addition to having the full access to spells up to 9th level, which makes her nasty, right? This level's recommended for 4 9th level characters. You're not going to take her on. But what we're forgetting about is the experience that goes into becoming 18th level. She stays in this cave because her ex-boyfriend, who was abusive and she murdered, told her never to leave. She's forgotten about the outside world. It feels a little bit like when we used to come up with, let's roll up 18th level characters or 20th level characters just to see all the, stuff they'd have and the statistics and spells and magic items or whatever. But there was no backstory to them, right? We just made them up. Versus actually having an 18th level character, all those experiences, she's just going to reject she's a druid, right? Unless she's like a cave druid or something that's interested in life, underground, she's going to want to be up above ground. And I'm just not so sure the gods that, have provide her with these powers, gods of nature or whatever, want this 18th level archdruid to be sitting in this tiny little solarium. So for me, this NPC as written doesn't quite make sense. So I already said if I was making a mega dungeon, it would be much larger, and then I might just have an archdruid here in some, hex size cavern or even larger, because then it makes sense for them to be protecting the wildlife here. It's very specialized. It needs a champion. But if I'm going to have this limited area and I'm going to have this, magically created thing with Hallister, I'm going to have him use one of his wishes to fool Willow into believing that she's either in a larger space or the space needs her, or there's some critical issue here that she doesn't realize exactly the situation she's in. And then, of course, I would create some means for the players to break this. So the thing is, when the players would interact with Willow, yes, she's distant but kind, but there's also something off. There's something about this, like, why is she in this space? And when you ask her, maybe she has answers like, well, I've always been here, or I don't know, I'm just making this up, right? But I'm just thinking about, I got to make this make a little more sense. The other thing is it gives the players something to do, whether or not it's on this level. And again, you can make this out. She has this crystal throne that the dwarves made that she sits on. And basically it gives you advantage on wisdom checks or something, but it doesn't have that much power. Well, what if this is the throne, which is the power center that keeps her here or something? I don't know. And you go to another level and you find some item that you come back and you free her. And suddenly she realizes, what the hell am I doing here? Because otherwise, as we'll see with some of the other minor figures here, she doesn't really have that much to do, unless you're just going to take her on, I suppose. And they do say that in the aftermath, if she's killed. But you're going to take on an 18th level archdruid? I don't know. So the other major power group on this level is a group of werebats, they're goblin werebats, that Willow allows to live here to basically feed on some of the wildlife. Again, the old neutral druid. As long as you don't unbalance nature, whatever, she will allow you to live here. And they are actually kind of tough because there's 19 of them. They're situated in these caves along by this abandoned village that is where the cult used to be that Willow wiped out. And 19, they also have a boss who's in love with Willow. He's got some more hit points. And they have the werebat description in the book. They're like a 2 CR. And 19 of them, because it says if they hear about an attack or something, they'll all come. Obviously, they can't all get there at once, but if you're fighting 19 and you've got 4 9th level characters, that's deadly. But probably you can take them on piecemeal. And the big boss has some items, he's got a couple magic items, and he's got keys to some of the other areas in this abandoned city. And then finally, you have a minor figure on this level, a young green dragon named Valdemar. And I say minor, you're like, wait a minute, a green dragon? That's not a major figure. No, 1, it's a young dragon, not as powerful. But 2, it's got a sword of sharpness embedded in its skull that has changed its alignment to neutral good. And so instead of being, lawful evil and diametrically opposed to Willow, it's she's sort of like, oh, it's okay to be here and don't harm it. So here's the thing. You think, okay, and you can see on the map how far away it is from where Willow usually hangs out. She has this 3-story structure made to look like a tree. If you attack the green dragon, you could kill it, but it immediately gives out a roar, and
She can use her shape change. She can do up to a CR6, so she can fly there and get there pretty quickly.
Willow comes running to its rescue. Now, she can't use her tree stride thing where she goes through plants 500 feet at a time, presumably because Hallister has prevented all kinds of teleport stuff, right? Maybe you could kill it at that point, get the Sword of Sharpness, but now Willow's really pissed at you, right? And she's not a good person to be pissed at. If you run into her first, she's going to say, hey, leave the green dragon alone. So I say it's a minor figure. Now, it does allow you to, there's this gate in the area that it lives, and it can allow you to have access to that if Willow says, yes, let these adventures through. But it's kind of anticlimactic. I mean, if I see a green dragon, I kind of want to fight it, right? And that's pretty much it in terms of major and one minor power on this level. There's some other monsters here that I'll go over. The next video, I'll do my usual criteria of exits and entrances, static versus non-static, resource drains, etc. But really, I found this level to be kind of underwhelming. I felt like it needed some changes. It needed to be a little spiced up, because this is the level I've read on Reddit boards and stuff about the Dungeon of the Mad Mage, where players start to go like, why are we here, right? What are we doing here? This archdruid, and dragon, there's some magic items around that we can collect, but we're really kind of here just to get to the next level. Now there is, as you'll see with entrance and exits, there's a entrance to a lost level, which is maybe part of this thing, but I'll have more on that next time. So if you like what you've seen, please subscribe to my channel. Always looking for more subscribers. Tell me if you've run the 5th level of Dungeon of the Mad Mage, what you thought of Willow, Valdemar, the green, the werebats, just how your players reacted to what's here. And of course, most importantly, my friends, keep playing D&D. Tell somebody else about it.